All right. So, two things on my mind today. So, you ever wonder, right, when you walk into a room and you've wondered to yourself, like, is anybody actually listening to me? You know, have you ever felt like that, right? Have you ever gone into a room and thought, is anybody actually listening to me? Or is everybody just scattered around me doing nonsensical things? Okay, I thought I was going to sneeze. So, yeah, I mean, I've been thinking about that recently, right? Like you go out, you make a video, and then nobody watches it, or, and you get discouraged, or, some things like that. But I'm not just talking about videos, I mean just in life in general, right? You go outside, like maybe you're passionate about something, and then nobody kind of gives a crap, is probably the best way I can say it. And I'm not sure whether that's liberating or if that's just like, people are busy, they've got things to do and blah, blah, blah. So it got me thinking, what's the best way I could communicate with people? And YouTube's a great platform for that, right? YouTube, you've got Instagram, and I thought about, well, maybe the reason why is because it helps you become creative, right? Like, I could go around and do this, and then people will find it funny because, I'm kind of doing something really, weird, right? No, I could sing, or I could do, jazz hands, or all this kind of stuff, right? So it got me thinking, maybe YouTube is a great creative outlet for just, well, dare I say it, messing / dossing around, as an experimentation platform. But it kind of links into that whole mental health piece as well, right? Like we see AI at the moment coming into play. Now, I've talked about it on this channel as being, somewhat anti-AI for many, many reasons, including, health deterioration, the effects that it has on things like the environment, these CEOs which are coming out now, going in, there was that one about the records one. Did you guys see that? Right? What was it? Big Machine Records? The guy just goes out in and just says, AI is a tool. We're coming with AI, and you're gonna pay me one way or another. You're gonna end up paying me. It's a tool. It's a tool. You can boo all you want. And these kids are going there like boo, boo, boo. I'd have told him much more than boo. Like if you're Gen Z watching this, trust me, I'd have done a lot more than boo. A lot more than boo. You guys gotta get much better at booing, right? And this is coming from a millennial, right? Back in my day, when I was full of piss and vinegar, right? We used to get the flip-flops out, right? We did it for things like presidents. We used to, back in the day, we would, back in the day, we would go ham, right? Presidents weren't safe, nowadays, we've upgraded from slippers. I'm not going to go into those details, but you guys know what I'm talking about. We've upgraded from slippers. We had freaking riots back in the day where shops had to close. That was an interesting one. And, the whole CVID, all that stuff. So, yeah, you guys got to get your pistification levels up, man. You're doing well, though. Like, I will grant you that. You Gen Z guys, you're doing very well. You're doing a lot better than the other ones that came up. I'm telling you, but, just throwing a couple of ideas out there. I'm not saying, get incredibly violent and all that kind of stuff. I'm just saying, maybe you want to borrow bits and pieces, don't get yourself arrested, right? But if you want to make a movement, just have a look left, right? On the left side of things. And, make your movement that way. But you guys are doing very well. Like, a lot of people give Gen Z a lot of flack around this sort of thing around, they're lazy, they don't want to work and us. No. Think about it from their point of view, right? The guy, like, I was in Stanmore Park the other day, right? And I saw these two young ladies, and one of the things that they said, that they were in school, and one of the things that they said was, when I get a job, and I thought to myself, like, when these people graduate, they're, maybe 16 years of age, right? And they go out, doing their thing, these young people which are coming out of college slash, school. And I'm thinking to myself, like, if things go the way that they keep going, like, how is it going to be possible that we get a job, right? For example, like I'm sitting here thinking to myself just the other day, like, you get so many certifications, you sit down, right? You think, oh, like this is going to help me with X, Y, and Z, right? And then you just look at it and you're like, you can't get anything because the first thing that's asked is, do you have any experience? Well, if and I can understand it from Gen Z's perspective. It's like, and Gen Alpha, Gen Bravo, whatever it's called nowadays. Like, I get where they're coming from because it's like, well, if you can't get any entry level experience to begin with in the field, how are you supposed to get employed? It's like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, the stock prices keep going up because people are saying, oh, AI, let's invest in AI because the economics work. The economics does not work, and I've got to recharge my damn headsets. So yeah, I mean the economics just don't work, right, for the whole AI thing. And hopefully I can get this working. Let's see. Are we on headsets? Let's see. All right, cool. Yeah, we're here. Cool. Yeah. Come on. Oh, there we go. Yeah. Okay, cool. So we got some audio back. Right, yeah. So I can see it from their perspective, right? It doesn't make sense. Like, okay, you go there, you spend the amount of a small country on AI. Let's say you do it in your big machine records, right? Because you're, dare I say it, an a-hole, right? But at the end of the day, you go there and you're like, oh, okay, it's a tool, it's a tool. Yes, it's a damn tool. I get that, right? But if you're going to go to the point of saying, right, F you because, you're a human and therefore machines work better, screw you. No, with all due respect, right? Not only, not with all due respect, not only are flippers coming out, pitchforks are coming out, and the freaking, things like the light on fly. I don't know what they're called, but you know what I'm getting at. And I'm not surprised that everyone's going boo 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 boo, you know, for these young kids coming out of university. I don't blame them. I would do too. I absolutely would. Right? The only one that did it right was Steve Wozniak. Right? Now, why did he do it so well? Because he was one of the first people to go out and create things like the Apple Lisa, right? He understands it. He's in the technical field. He understands what it means to have this kind of disruption in technology because he was one of the pioneers who did it in the first place. Not big machines, not big machine records or one of these other companies that come up and says, oh, AI is going to take your job. Well, what was the bloody point of making £4,000, £8,000, $16,000, $62,000, whatever it cost to go and do the degree then? Only for you guys to come up and say, oh yeah, AI, innit? So F you. I'm so sick and tired of these tone-deaf CEOs talking absolute bollocks out of their ass. Yes, AI is a tool. Yes, you can do significantly great things with AI. Absolutely. In fact, today I built an entire website from scratch using AI. I thought it was absolutely amazing, right? But I still needed to learn the fundamentals. I still needed to understand what the AI was doing at particular points in time and not just trust its decisions blindly. That's the point, right? Because why am I saying this with such passion? Because AI is a prediction engine. It's designed for predictions, right? The real one we should be worried about, if you want to be worried about anything, is human biological interfaces, right? Where we take neurons from our brain, right, humanoid organisms, and put them into petri dishes, like biological cells, right? Created biological cells which become neural networks, right? Because they're neurons, right? 200,000 neurons you can purchase today, right? In order for it to do LLM machine learning training, right? Now, that's scary. Your brain has 86 billion neurons. That is scary. 86 billion neurons, right? In a petri dish, in a human brain interface, right? Technologically created. Imagine that in a data center. My good grief. Like, that is scary. That's Matrix level stuff, right? That's like, forget Terminator. That's like, Murphy, right, from RoboCop. Cyborg level stuff. That is the stuff that I'm worried about. Why? Because that thing takes 20 watts to run. Forget the quantum computing stuff. That's just a way for us to understand the consciousness that happens inside of the brain, right? It's a gateway. But this stuff, right? The fact that your brain could be worth, so much money is insane to me. Like, I'm genuinely worried about that, because if we reach a level of computation where, our neurons are now the currency, I mean, it's only a matter of time, before we get to a point where we can have, a huge amount of data being processed by the thing between my ears. Right? Yeah, I know I got nice eyes, but I meant my brain. Right? That sort of thing. I mean, it's scary to think that that is the potential future, and it's already here now. Like, and it just made me think, what do you do? Like, and it's, I totally understand Gen Z's frustration in this. It's like, you're coming into a world whereby, it's changing from minute to minute, second to second, and, all you want is a bit of stability. You want to have a life which is meaningful, right? Coming out with a life which is meaningful. And I thought that's something that I could have going into software development, and not really. It's not that meaningful. Why? Because we work on projects that we don't understand. We work on projects that don't give us fulfillment. We work on things that burn us out over a period of a month, and we're sitting there trying to keep everything together with a family, with some kids, right? And we're helping other people at the same time. All of this other stuff is coming on top of us, right? Got to do the dishes, got to take the dog for a walk, right? Bloody laundry, all this other crap, just to get some peace. And then on top of that, if we're business owners, good luck, especially if you're in the UK. I just had a documentary. The one guy was doing ice cream business, 65k a month, and the guy still can't make ends meet. I sat there thinking to myself, oh, the UK is just a shithole. Like, what the F is going on? Like, seriously, like, it just really is irritating in that ways. Like, I know, mental health and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I totally understand that. But, you've got these forces which are against you, which I can see just in everybody's faces is like, what's the point of being here? Like, why bother if everything around us is just a money grab? It's just a tax grab, And then I'm seeing other content on YouTube, which is, prove it, we're in the prove it economy. Well, we're not in the prove it economy. We're in the economy which just says, are you actually standing by what you say? That's the world that we live in now, because we've been taken for a fool every 5 minutes by people who are, people like politicians, people who just lie, expecting a result at the end and not getting anywhere in the process. So I totally understand the frustration. I get it. I totally understand it. As somebody who's gone through that particular fire. So what does that mean for somebody like you and me? So one thing that I would say in all of this is don't give up on your vision, right? The one thing that I learned through people like, Calvin Coils, for example, is, don't give up on the vision, articulate it more, and then work down from that, looking at the beliefs, looking at the underlying fundamentals, right? The validity of the actions, which are formed by the belief, in order to create the outcome when such uncertainty happens. And it's something that is not easy to do. I will grant you that. Bloody hell is it not easy to do. Right? Even making the videos here on YouTube, not easy to do. Normally, right, I'll do this in a cinematic. I'd have my face here, boom, 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 right, like that, right? Why? Dramatic effect, it's creative, it's edgy, it's out there, it's all that kind of stuff. Right, but my memory card's in with SanDisk right now, and my Osmo 3 needs a memory card, which I don't have. So, it's a bit of a catch-22 situation when your memory card only writes at 30 megs when you need 80. Yeah, That's what I'm talking about. So it's like, well, okay, I make do with what I've got. I've got a camera up here. Bloody hell, it records in 4K. It's good enough. Damn it, I'll just record the video. And then make something out of it. And that's one of the reasons why, things like the Worldwide Mental Health Project exists, right? Which you can go on my website, theworldwidementalhealthproject.com. I'll leave a link in the description below. You can book a 30-minute call with me where we can look at how we can solve things like your burnout if you're a software engineer, and look at, I'm becoming a certified life coach as well, so I can help you with that. Fitness goals, for example, as well. I'm a certified level 3 PT as well, right? So we can look into all of that, and seeing how can we change the cognition from burnout into something of action, which helps you feel more aligned as a software developer. Because going through that entire fire, not understanding the different nuances between the business, right? Being a Scrum Master myself, this is something that I had to learn myself, right? What the Scrum Master wants, and what does the other parts of the organization want in terms of the software which is being created. And being an ex DevOps engineer, I can help you with that as well, that integration to understand, well, what is it that they actually are saying, right? Why am I having trouble with things like, my performance improvement review, right? Why am I on it in the first place, right? What's going on with people at the top? These sort of questions which, are burning. How do I go from a junior engineer to a senior level engineer? Is it even possible nowadays, right? What's the sort of things that people are looking for, right? And that's what I mean by, going into a room and not having that voice, right? Because I've been there. My ideas have been rejected on the table, 100%, right? I was working on one project, and I like to pride myself on a bit of perfectionism. And I've been penalized for this. Trust me, I've been penalized. And I go in there, you look at this project, you're like, okay, I've got no idea what to do, right? And one of the things that one of my mentors taught me was, well, write it down, create a plan, use it as a plan of action, and then go with it. And my God, that guy was right. Even with things like AWS Secrets Manager, right? Rotating those secrets around, using things like external secrets and Kubernetes, right? That sort of thing, right? And that can take some time to get your head around, right? Why? Because you've got other things in your mind, right? You don't want to go... I think the disconnect is this, right? You don't want to be sitting on your computer from 9 o'clock in the morning to 9 o'clock at night. And I've seen this far too often. You have a life, right? Sitting at a computer from 9 o'clock to 9 o'clock at night is not healthy, especially when you've got a wife and kids in the back. I don't have a wife and kids, but I'd imagine that would seriously pee me off, right? Not having to go there, spend some time, with the people that I love, right? What kind of life is that? You sit there, oh, why? Oh, because I need to learn AWS. My boss is going to come on me. Nah, solutions manager, solutions architect. So just do a couple of YouTube videos, 5 o'clock, 1 hour, and then use that as a lab the next day. Like, don't get me wrong, it takes hours to learn that stuff. Terraform, Kubernetes, external secrets, right? You've got your other Helm charts as well. Like we had one, Chart Museum, which was doing a replication of the Helm charts, right? Kubernetes security. It's a bit of a joke when you think about it, right? Having things like 12 certificates under your belt, and then you still can't get like work afterwards. Why? Because of the whole layoffs and the whole AI overinvestment and all that kind of stuff. It is a joke. It is an absolute joke. So I thought to myself, well, okay, what's the biggest value, right? So when you're in that situation, one of the things that you can take away from this video, if you take away nothing, is what is the value that I can create with the vision that I have in my mind, right? What are the sort of things like, how do I get to that place, that really lights me up? And that takes a lot of exploration. It takes a lot of exploration, right? I'm coming up to 34, right? Believe it or not. And this is something that I've had to go through on my own personal journey, right? From the age of 31, right? Got totally overwhelmed at 31 with the whole job thing, right? And I'm now coming up to 34, writing these things out, just trying to keep peace in my mind, right? It's a long, difficult, arduous process, right? And then going in from the person who is, at a job, at work, and then trying to go into things like entrepreneurship, right? And I think everyone should do that. I think fundamentally everyone should be able to have that chance. I fundamentally believe that. I think, having a job nowadays is just not enough. It just really isn't. Like, especially if you live in the UK. Like, if you live in the UK, like, it's just not worth it. It really isn't. And I was reading an article today, going back to the young people back at Stanmore Park. 25%, the latest figure, 25% of young people are unemployed. 25%. 1 in 4. 1 in 4. How did we get to this? Coming out of Brexit, you think, oh, that's quite a good thing. We're becoming a sovereign nation. And then we've been reduced to ashes by decisions that were just incompetent. Like, make it make sense. Make it make sense. Right? So, I'm not surprised that, talented people are going rogue, right? Talented people are just turning around and saying, this is not it. This is not it. Because at the end of the day, it isn't. It's just a complete and utter waste of time. All in the name of stocks, all in the name of pumping up a commodity, pumping up a certain level of stocks, right? The latest one that I saw on the internet was Dell, right? Apparently Donald Trump himself pumped in 1 to 5 million in the stock price for Dell and promoted it live on television. Now, whether or not that was AI, I don't know. Right? We'll have to look at the charts. But at the end of the day, it makes you think, it makes me think, okay, well, if Trump is actually saying things like, Dell, like, we're really good at Dell, we're really good at Dell. They make the computers, the best computers. Some say they make the world's best computers. They went there, they did the thing, they did a great thing, right? And then you have CS, I think his name is called CS Computers, goes in and says, they don't make great computers, the only ones that they do which work really well are the XPS. Like, what? Like, I have an Asus, right? This computer that you're watching on has been rendered on an Asus, right? An Asus. I have an Acer here. Both are from, have a guess where both of them are from, right? Where they're manufactured, right? They're manufactured in Shenzhen, right? And coming from, I went to Hong Kong about a year ago, right? One of the nicest cities I've ever been to, right? And I just think to myself, I look at that and I think, there's a bit of a kind of miscommunication going on, because, we think of these particular countries as adversarial, but they're not adversarial. They're not. They're just really advanced, right? Drone delivery is a thing in China, right? You go to Shenzhen, KFC, things like well, I don't know what the version of KFC is, but KFC, Jollibee, right? Jollibee, right? That sort of stuff from 7-Eleven, like that. Maybe 10-15 minutes, right? And if you're in the UK, what do you have to do? You have to do your A2CFC, your GVC. Make sure that you understand air law. Make sure that you understand airmanship, right? Great stuff, right? But it doesn't help if I want to build a delivery business, right? Go there with things like Waymo, right, which gets stuck in the middle of traffic, and then we've got these little, drone dogs type stuff. The ones, the white ones, are they Waymos as well? I don't know, but they have the little pole that goes up, right, and you put your food in, right? Like, it's getting a bit mad. It's getting a bit mad, It's getting a bit mad. And, yeah, that sort of stuff. But we still don't have drone delivery, which is weird, right? But in the US, you do. So in the UK, we don't. We don't have drone delivery in the UK, right? You can't have, there's FRZs, right? So flight restricted zones, whereby you can't fly over them because they are either military bases, or they're things like aerodromes which are nearby. So you have a 2.5 mile radius, nautical miles, which turn around and say, actually, you can't fly here unless you have proper permissions. Now, usually the FRZs from aerodromes are really, really good. They just turn around and say, let us know, give you the permissions, and then you can fly, you know, within, which is legal to fly then because you got permission, right? And that also, I believe that also counts if you have a sub 250 drone, by the way. Yeah, if you have a sub 250 drone, you should be doing that. You know, getting the permission from the air controller, right, the ATC, to say, yeah, I can fly my drone, right? So very, very important stuff, by the way, right? And it's even more important if you've got a bigger drone, right? You've got your Mavics, for example, right, rather than your Mini 4s, because those Mavics, you know, they're over a kilo. You know, you need to be cautious. You know, that thing goes inside, you know, goes towards somebody's head, you know, at that speed, you know, 25 meters per second or whatever it is, you know, you could end up knocking someone out. So you've got to be very careful there. You've got to be very careful. So yeah, you know, that's what I mean, right? You can't set up a drone business that way without proper legislation throughout the capital, because there's, you know, you've got throughout the capital there's a no-fly zone. So I don't know how that's going to work down here, right? But yeah, we can have Waymo going, you know, throughout the capital, you know, driverless stuff. It's just like, you know. So yeah. Makes you think. Makes you think. So, what's the takeaway from all this? So, in summary, I guess just set the vision, right? Feel the vision for your beliefs and your values. Put it into action, right? And then, you know, I guess the one thing that works for me is forget the depression, right, of where you are now, and think about where you could be. And use that as the vision, because all your thoughts, beliefs, and actions are going to go towards that goal, right? Because if you can see it in your head, that's most likely where you're going to be, right? Because everything is making you think, you know, I see myself there, I see myself there. I don't know why. I don't know why. You know, you have dreams, visions, thoughts, right? And according to David Baer, right, the thoughts become actions because they become your belief system, right? And then there's that gap between, you know, what we think we believe we need to be and where we are now, right? So I'm thinking to myself, just use it as fuel, right? For me, that could be the World Wide Mental Health Project. That could be something else. But right now, you know, right now where I want it to be is the World Wide Mental Health Project, because I think it's important to get that message out there that software engineers are not alone, right? It can feel like that at times, sitting there writing C#, you know, Next.js, you know, and then looking like you're a zombie because you were on the computer till 2 a.m., right? But at the end of the day, it's not a healthy way to live, right? There's got to be a certain balance, a certain give that has to be struck, right? Because you can get so sucked into that sort of level, you know, that sort of thing, you know, because you can think about things like the money, right? The money's great, right? But at the end of the day, right? And you know what the weird thing is? Like, you know, it's probably the paycheck is something like 10K, right? That you actually attain. But after all the expenses, it's down to like 4, 3, 2K, 1K, depending on your seniority and level and years of experience. But the one thing that can stop you, right, in an organization is things like likability. It's the soft core skills, right? Likability. Do you align with the product vision, for example? Are you aligned with the sprint goals? Are you meeting the sprint increments? And even then you can get screwed, right? So it's this kind of juggling act of likability, your work, how you interact with people, right? In order to be successful in places like software, as opposed to doing all the tech. And it's something that I had to learn the hard way, right? Because I like the tech, right? I like the tech to the nth degree, but with AI, less so. Why? Because AI can do a lot of the heavy lifting, to be honest, right? It makes some pretty good predictions. As long as I give it the right data, you know, it can predict the fault with all due respect, you know. Giving it access to things like the GitHub CLI, for example, looking at the pipeline, right? To see where is the actual fault, you know, and then comparing that data with things like your Docker container, right? If you've got a SIG a SIG-up fault, right? An OOM, right, out of memory, a kill, something like that, whereby the processes inside the container are sporadic. PHP work, right, for things like PHP workers. That's one that I personally had. And I used AI, and then AI found the fault. Right? Why? Because it had the right level of data in order to make the correct assessment through this balancing act of restrictions. So if I can restrict the amount of possibilities there are for an AI, I can make a better prediction, right? And that's the thing that a lot of CEOs, a lot of people in tech misinterpret that. Yes, AI is a tool, but AI thinks about every single possibility out there, right? Every single one. And this is how we end up with hallucinations. Because we don't restrict the model. We give it something generic. We turn around and say, oh, build me a jar. And we don't tell it the dimensions. But what jar is it going to build? We don't know. What's supposed to be in the jar? Is there something supposed to be in the jar? Is it supposed to be like a level of mist? Is there supposed to be water in the jar? Is it supposed to be an empty jar? Are we using it to grow food? Do we use it for water? We don't know. So we'll just give you a generic jar and just say, oh, here you go. Right? Just like a kid would. For the same reason. Because it's too open-ended a question. Now, if I was to turn around and say, well, actually, I need a jar, that holds 3 liters worth of water. It needs to be airtight. I need it to be, look a certain way, like make it look like an oval, for example. Maybe we get something like this. It's 3 liters. Oval in shape. It's got a bit of mist. Could use a bit of a clean, but there we go, right? I have something that I had envisioned. And I think that's my point here. That a lot of these CEOs are saying, oh, well, it's coming to take your job and blah, 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 blah. AI is a prediction engine that needs constraints in order to work. That's all it is at the end of the day. It doesn't matter how much learning, how much LLM training, how much, money is invested, all of that stuff. It makes no difference. All it means is that it has levels of data which are higher, right? It has higher level orders of data because we're making more and more mixture of experts, right? Because I don't need the LLM to know music if I'm trying to do, glassware, right? To understand how to build this. I only need a certain amount of the LLM to work, right? I don't need to know about music if I'm building glass. And that's my point, that the way it's been told to us is a complete and utter misunderstanding and a lie at best, right? Because if you're in fear, right? Because if you're in fear, what matters then? Well, then you're going to be saying, oh, well, I need to understand AI, I need to get ahead of the curve, and I need to understand all of this stuff. When in reality, what's actually going to help you? Well, it's going to be your creativity. It's going to be, your empathy with people. It's going to be your understanding, the trust that they build, the relationships, the community, right? That's the sort of stuff that's going to help, not this, machine, right? That's trying to build stuff. It can help me with certain aspects of it. Yeah, absolutely, right? It can help me, build that website. It can help me with things like, understanding certain topics, searching for information quicker, right? AI search engines, definitely going to be a thing. 100%. Why? Because I can just talk to it and say, like, look, I've got symptoms of, it's a hot day, for example. My throat's a little bit sore. I'm coughing. What could that mean? Well, it could mean many things, right? But my eyes are watering. I've got my nose running as well. Like, is there anything specific? AI might turn around and say, oh, it's hay fever. All right, good observation. Stuff like that. Pretty good. And that's what I'm talking about, That's what I'm talking about. That, it's not what people are saying it is, right? The bee's knees. No, it's not. 100% it's not. You, actual intelligence, right? AI. You are the AI, right? You got this in the middle of your head, right? The most powerful AI there is, right? Forget 1 trillion parameters. You got 86 billion of the bastards in there, right? 86 billion parameters can fit in this little thing. And it only takes 20 watts of power, not a effing data center, right? We don't need those. No, we don't really need them. Why? Because in reality, all they are is just chips and microchips on a network, right, with a bit of software. We've been doing that stuff, since about the 1980s, right? Since the dot-com boom. We've been doing that since dot-com, right? Even before then, right? With telephone exchanges, right? The little mechanical switches. That's been there for ages, man. So it's nothing new. This is just history repeating itself, right? And that's why I think, it's useful to learn AI, absolutely. But, why let it do all the thinking for me? It makes no sense. I had more fun, and this is, you want to see something weird? I had more fun learning Cisco, right, from 20 years ago, right, when I first tried to do my CCNA, than I did doing programming. Why? Because I can get AI to do it. And now a lot of people will turn around and say, well, you can write iOS commands in AI. Yeah, absolutely you can, with artificial intelligence. But at the end of the day, I don't feel the same. I don't get that rush. I don't get that sense of achievement. Why? Because I'm offloading it. That's why everybody's saying, well, this feels like AI slop. Because it is AI slop. It's made by an AI, right, to do a certain task that has been offloaded onto it. So you feel jarred, right? Right? Why? Because at the end of the day, the actual learning that it would have taken to learn the damn skill, right, has been reduced to just ask the AI. Just ask the AI. So why bother? Right? What's the point of me learning, Ajax, PHP, HTML5, CSS, Terraform, when I can just ask the AI to do it? And to be honest, it's not wrong. It's not a wrong question. Because at the end of the day, right, with the right prompt, yeah, I could create something. Absolutely you can. So the actual answer to the question is, I don't know. It's such a good question that I think, we should get these CEOs to turn around and ask us, what is the point of it? We should hold them accountable. And I think, and if you want to know the reason why, I'll tell you. I think it's all to do with reducing the labor costs. Personally. I genuinely think that. Why? Because if I can get a robot to do something and and they can work 24 hours, why the heck do I need you? Right? But AI can't copy my creativity. It can't build a community, even though it thinks it can. Right? It can't copy my experiences. It can't copy my creativity. It can't copy my style of leadership. So, what's that? 5 things already it can't replicate? Oh, but it can reach AGI, that level of consciousness. No, it can't. No, it can't, because what you're describing is brain-human computer interfaces. That's what you're describing. And maybe, and just maybe, it's possible. But at the end of the day, when we reach that stage, then there really is nothing for humans to do at that point. Why? Because what would be the point of learning at that point? What would be the point of advancement? What would be the point of taking risks at that point? All the risks are complete. Everything's been worked out. And humans aren't designed to stay still. We're not going to stay still. If anything, we'll go out and destroy that before we get to that stage. Because, we get bored. We're humans, so what do? Oh, well, we're going to go start a war somewhere. Oh, we'll probably go and, marry somebody's cousin, marry someone's wife, all that sort of stuff. Why? Just for a bit of conflict, just for the high. Because we're humans, that's what happens. It's not comfortable to say, but hey, it's the truth. It's not comfortable, but it's the truth. So yeah, stick to the ideals, man. You'll be fine. You'll be fine. Don't worry. Just stick to the vision. Be creative. Build that community, right? Help one another out, right? It's a difficult time. Everyone's in a difficult time right now. The job stuff is hell. It's bad. And more importantly than anything, look after yourself. Please, guys, look after yourselves, because you know, the stress mentally on all of this, I can, you know, I don't have kids, I don't have all that kind of stuff, but I can imagine just the level of tyranny that happens throughout somebody's brain, you know, losing, being made redundant, you know, being put under such immense pressure to perform in an environment that just doesn't suit them. So, you know, look after yourselves. Be gentle with yourselves, you know, because it can take a toll on you mentally. It definitely can. So stay calm, take it easy, one step at a time. Keep the vision, keep the belief, keep the values, and go from there. All right. If you learn nothing, if you don't even book a call with me today, just that's the value that I wish I had back when I was in those particular situations, right? And I wish the one thing that I did was just take a holiday. Sometimes the greatest the greatest lesson that anybody can learn is two. Two from my experience. One is this: the greatest action that you can perform in a certain situation is to do nothing. Sometimes that is the best action you can ever perform. The ability to do nothing. Isn't that beautiful? Now, a lot of people might be thinking, oh, what's this idiot talking about? How can he be saying, oh, yeah, do nothing? How is that an action? I'm sitting here, I'm in the shit, and this guy's telling me do nothing. Go F him, right? F him. Right? This guy's talking out of his ass. Believe me, right? Believe me when I say this, right? For your own sanity, right? Take a holiday, do nothing for a week. It's one of the things that I wish I did, because you reset your brain, right? You'll have nothing in your brain. You'll come back feeling refreshed, and your productivity will increase, right? What are we on? 3, 4? I don't remember. But anyway, yeah, your productivity will increase, meaning that you'll get more done. It's the same thing, right? Put it this way. There's a video on the internet about a guy who sat for about a year staring at a wall for 15 minutes. No phone. And his productivity level increased. Because it's very similar to doing meditation. Right? But when we're addicted to our phones, right, we go through, we look at that YouTube video, we look at that hot girl somewhere, right? We're playing music and then doing our work, all of this sort of stuff, right? I'm guilty of it too. That's the sort of thing that can have detrimental effects, because now we have split attention. Yeah? That's the sort of thing that I'm talking about, right? And that, right, because we're sitting inside, we're doing our work, can make us feel like absolute shite. Makes us feel like shit. Being unproductive, being more behind. When realistically, all you want to do is just do the action that moves the needle, right? The 80-20 rule by Plato. Yeah? And sometimes that 80-20 rule, we don't even know. We don't know. We just think, oh, okay, I'll do what I can to move it in a certain direction. But sometimes even that isn't enough, because whatever we're doing, we're reliant on other people. It doesn't matter if you work for yourself. It doesn't matter if you work for a company, right? They'll say, oh, but the emphasis is on you. Yeah, the emphasis is on you. But the emphasis is on you to a point. You can only do so much as a single person. After that, you need people, right? The whole rhetoric of, no one's coming to save you and this kind of stuff. Well, they have to, because at the end of the day, it affects them as well. Think about it that way, right? Because at the end of the day, right, if you're building a business, if you're working for somebody else, right, people, what's the word? People trust, right? People buy from people. People buy from people, right? If people buy from people, right, and if no one is coming to save you and all this crap, right, how can people buy from me? How does society work with that reference of thinking? Oh, no one's coming to save me. I'll just sit on my arse all day. Because that's what you're telling people. That's what you're telling people. Oh, don't worry, no one's coming to save you. Right. So you building a business from scratch, right? You're trusting people to go and invest in that. Because I heard that from a coach. I heard this from a coach. So, you're a coach telling people this crap, right? You're not a very good one then, are you? Fuck me. The whole point of being a coach is to enable people to not only see things for themselves, but to uplift them at the same time. And give them a little bit of direction. You don't need to be giving them massive amounts of direction, just give them a little bit. Right? So that way they believe in themselves, so that way they can do the thing. Right? Then people will buy from them. Then you can talk about, no one's coming to save you and all that crap. Right? Because there's a base. When there's no base, you got no right to say that. Because you're an asshole. Right? I'm sorry to say that, but you are. You're just an asshole. Because you have more interest in your own self than other people. I'll say it here freely, folks. I'll say it here freely. And I don't give a shit because it's wrong. It's just fundamentally fucked up and wrong. Right? I'd rather somebody turn around and say, well, look, right? What are you trying to create in this world? What are you trying to build? Because this is what I would tell my younger self, right? When I was in that situation, I'd just tell them, like, look, bro, breathe. Yeah, you just come out of the job, right? That was stressful. I get that. You don't have any income. I get that. Right? Right now is a tough time. I get that. Right? But think about it this way. What are you trying to create? What is it that you want? Now we're getting somewhere. Now we're saying, okay, that fire is coming back, right? What is it that you're trying to create? What's the vision, bro? Okay, you want to go and do that? Okay. Let's break it down. Right. Break it down, right? What do you need? What would you need? Okay, maybe a little bit of capital. Maybe I need to learn a course. Maybe I need to meditate. Maybe I need to just go in the wilderness for a couple of days just to get my head right, right? That's the sort of thing. Okay, now we can get down to the action step, right? To create the plan, to create the future. And this is one of the things that I wish I flipping did, right? I actually made a load of plans thinking, nothing's going to come, and then you think to yourself, okay, well, I spent 5 months, 6 months on this. Fuck this, because at the end of the day, nothing's coming. And then you think to yourself, okay, well, is it a game of longevity, or is it just that I'm crazy? Now that is the actual question that you're asking, right? That's the actual question that you're asking, because you're used to a certain framework, you're used to a certain thing, and now you're trying something else, but you don't know because it's uncertain to you, and it's a method of evolution. That's what it is. So yeah, that's what it is, right? You got to get to that level. So how do you break that? Well, I'll tell you in a minute. So the way that you break that, right, is by well, the vision and the beliefs, right? Because that justifies your actions. So I think it's just keeping true to the vision and just saying, like, look, okay, it's going to work out. Here's the proof, right? And I think, it's not action precedes clarity as much as it is do you believe in what you're doing so that it brings clarity, right? I think that's a bit of a misconception that action does, bring clarity. Yes, it does, right? It absolutely does, because, you're stepping into the wilderness. That makes a lot of sense. I think it's more of a case of, well, do I believe it's the right action in the wilderness? Right? Because if I believe that is the correct action, right, the possibilities of me going towards the goal are going to be endless. But if I don't, then I'm going to rescind, right? The growth is not going to happen because there's no belief. There's nothing underneath it that gives it that foundation to grow. And that's what I wish a lot of people knew, right? This is what I wish my younger self knew. Because when I was younger, right, I just went step by step in self-development. I just said, okay, well, that's the goal, that's the goal, right? And I just did this kind of back and forth. And then you realize at a certain time, at a certain age, it's just like, well, maybe that wasn't what I wanted. Maybe I wanted something else. So you start expanding. You start looking for different things. You start thinking, okay, what other possibilities are there, right? If I've got other possibilities, I can then do certain things. And that's the thing that I'm talking about here. Yeah. Don't, expansion requires you to look at different things and then boil it down into something that aligns with you. Aligns with you. Because it's an alignment issue. That alignment issue is the belief system. That's what I learned. And that alignment, right? That alignment comes through actions, but more importantly, comes as part of thoughts. That then instructs my behaviors, which then become the actions that take me towards the goal. Right? But there are things that come into play with that, which is like fear, doubt, uncertainty. So it goes back to the belief system again. Right? Do I believe that through all of this shit that's coming through my way, I can do the thing? And it's not as easy as saying yes or no, because even if we think yes or no, right, we know subconsciously we have that doubt. So it's a balancing act. That's the crazy fucked up thing. It's a balancing act. And that's what I wish I told my younger self. It's a balancing act that is very difficult to get right without the right people. Because the environment plays a toll, man. The environment plays a toll. The 5 people that there's that rule, the 5 people that you know, right? You are the result of the 5 people that you know and that you hang around with. That's the thing, man. If they all uplift you, you're going to be fit if they're all fit. If they're going to uplift you, you're going to be the next one that becomes uplifted. If they're all, wealthy, you're going to be the next one who becomes wealthy. So it's all it's all about that mindset, getting that corrected so that the results come. And there you go. I hope that's been helpful, and I hope that becomes worthy of you booking your call to get further into it for every individual who's sat here and watched this for 53 minutes coming up to now. If you have, I'm incredibly grateful. Right, book a call with me in the link below, that Worldwide Mental Health Project link. 30 minutes consultation for free, and we'll get into even more detail about how I can help you in this kind of difficult time, especially if you're a software engineer, right? I want to speak to you and you're going through things like burnout, for example, on the keyboard, right? We'll have a look, we'll dissect it, make a bespoke plan for you, so that way, things become a little bit more clear and we can get to the bottom of what's going on. All right, I'll see you in the next one. Appreciate it.